You're listening to Gym Owner Jams.
Welcome to another episode of Gym Owner Jams. As you can see, we brought in one of our coaches. We forced him, Michael Fawcett. Welcome.
Thanks, Strokes. Good to be here with you guys.
How are you doing?
Yeah, good.
Back in the gym?
Yeah, it's been nice. Tough. Nick and I have been doing a couple of workouts, so it's been sore mentally, a bit draining the last couple of days, Nick, I think,
Wow.
more than anything else.
It's hard to keep up with someone that's 9 years old.
All right, there's some things that happened in the CrossFit world, mainly just the Dave Castro interview with Talking Elite Fitness. Kyle will give us just brief snippets or highlights of that very long podcast.
Yeah, so the first little bit of the podcast was Dave Castro talking about it. I guess you can understand from his perspective what he was saying. He was saying that now that the community basically banded together and got rid of Greg Glassman and got CrossFit sold, where do they draw the line is basically what he was saying. But they did make the point of that's kind of what the free market is. You know, as a community, we should be able to dictate who's in charge and what happens there. And then the second half of the podcast got quite a bit better, and he started to speak about trying to up the communication. They spoke about the CrossFit, I think it's called the CrossFit internship that they've launched now, which is quite a cool initiative. And then he kind of alluded to the change in the game season. I suppose we can talk a little bit about that now quickly before we move on. But mainly mentioned that there is a move to go back to the way that it used to be. In terms of the Open might be earlier on in the year, not in October. It might go back to February where it was.
And that's the one I liked because he said people go on holiday and they come back and the Open is the first thing you can look forward to as. So it's the first time for me that Dave Castro realized there's more than just the athletes going to the games. He said this is sort of your middle February, in February goal.
Well, it's dangling the carrot, right,
yes,
of those people that are coming back, something for them to work towards.
And
which
I
is quite
completely agree with that. It just makes sense to have it in February, March.
He also alluded to the fact that they will go back to a hybrid type thing of the regionals and the sanctionals. Not sure how that would go. And then what interested me more was he spoke about afterwards CrossFit actually conducting competitions not just for the elite but for different levels, in terms of you might be able to go to a sanctional type thing for intermediates, for example, or which could be quite interesting to see and could be quite fun to go and compete in if you know you're never going to reach that top level, which I thought was quite cool.
The games are delayed again, hey? They've said
The
that
games are now in September so far, but I'm not sure exactly all the details of the games.
Now the big question is, are they going to get some of those big name athletes to come back to the table?
So I know Chandler Smith made himself available again.
Okay.
I'm not sure of the rest, but I mean that's quite a big tick in the right
Well,
direction.
I know that Dave Castro said in that podcast that within the week after the podcast, they had to let them know whether they were available or not. So I think by the end of this week, we'll know who's decided not to go to the games at all.
It's, if you had to speculate, I mean, if Chandler Smith's back on the
I
table,
think
more
most
than likely Noah Olsen is back in the
I think
game.
Noah Olsen will be back. I think that there was a lot of people that stuck around. Matt Fraser never really made a decision. He'll still be there. I think Tia Toomey will be back. I think it's just too big of a thing for them not to be at, especially with the changes that have happened.
Imagine how mad they will be if somebody else that is not the fittest person wins the CrossFit Games just because they weren't there.
Interestingly enough, though, that Live Loud, I think it's Live Live or something sports, with Chief O'Keefe that runs it. They do Wadapalooza. They've also now
Loud and Live.
That's it. They've disconnected themselves from CrossFit now with all their sanctionals. So they're still running the one in Brazil. They're still running Wadapalooza. There's about 3 or 4 more of them that they're doing that are no longer CrossFit competitions. So it's interesting to see how that will evolve, being that exactly.
Yeah.
And being that O'Keefe is Matt Fraser's manager and he manages a lot of those top athletes, will there be a conflict of interest between them competing there and competing in CrossFit type events? I don't know. Will it go back to maybe the way that Dubai used to be, where it wasn't a CrossFit event, but it was just a competition that athletes would go and compete in? It's going to be interesting to see.
Do you not think someone like a Rogue might come in and do their own games, in that
It's possible,
aspect, and kind of go that route in the private sector?
It's possible, but I do think with the type of, if you from a business perspective, I don't think that Eric Rosa would let a rogue slip through the cracks. I'm pretty sure there would be some sort of deal going on there. He's already brought back Nicole Carroll. She's now rejoined with CrossFit as on the certification side. So for him to have done that tells me that he's already speaking to all those people that have gone, the big names in the community. So I don't know. It would be interesting, but I do see that he wouldn't let something like that happen.
No, I mean, I think sanctionals or these sanctioned events, I think it would work great for the community to get CrossFit out of just the game. So, you have a competition in Cape Town and you expose CrossFit to a different audience and all over the world. I think the model just was flawed because you had to pay a lot of money just to use the name. Again, it was one of those similar to the affiliate fee where you just pay for the name and you don't get any support. I would think if you pay, they need to do something where they either guide you with the programming or guide you with the setup or whatever the case might be. But this is my concern, is if they just continue with $1,000 for a sanctional or whatever it was, they are going to run the risk that a rogue starts taking over and doing their own competition and Loud and Live do their own series. Because then you can imagine them doing a Brazil, Wadapalooza, the West Coast Classic, and maybe something in Europe and saying, well, you can score points. I can very easily see something like that forming because the prize money is there. And then guys will not do the regular CrossFit season and then just jump on those.
I would like to see from a spectator's point of view that they grow some sort of committee or something like that kind of programs these sanctionals, and not just from a programming standpoint but from a spectator standpoint. If you look at, for example, Rich Froning's sanctional that he programmed, how well that program was thought out in terms of when you watched it as a spectator. If you take all the graphics away, if you take all the commentary away, you would still be able to follow who was winning. You would still be able to see who's going. And I think a lot of these sanctionals, like the one I watched in Brazil, I think that's programmed by Austin Maliola and them. Great programming, like the workouts are amazing. But not a lot of thought went, in my opinion, into, from a spectator point of view, how do you see it happening? Wadapalooza is another one of them that's generally programmed pretty well, that you can see what's going on.
There's two schools of thought there, though, because there's a lot of people that say, you should program to find the fittest, and they pick out certain sanctioned events or sanctionals from last year that weren't programmed specifically to cover all of what CrossFit is all about, Then there's that other aspect of the visual part of it where it must be spectator friendly. But I feel it's very difficult to have both all the time. I mean, Dave Castro is in fact a master of that, and love the guy or hate the guy, that's one of the things he has really done well, is he's been able to get as close to the tests that we want to see for the fittest and strongest people around, but it's also been centered around that visual aspect, the spectators and the flow of the workout and how it looks and how he lays out the floor, and that was revolutionary. But the problem comes in is that if you get a committee, say, or a governing body or whatever that starts to program for all of these events, you're getting a very limited view. And you're also going to get a certain type of athlete coming out of every kind of sanctional, because you as a programmer have a certain thought pattern, you have a certain way of thinking and programming. Rich Froning himself has said it many times, he's good at Dave Castro's programming. So he's good at CrossFit Games style programming because that's what he's worked for since 2014 or 2011 when he started. And that's the problem I think they were arguing about, is you can get into a situation where you start repeating things and you start getting, there's 28 sanctionals in the year and all of them are looking very similar. At what point do spectators stop watching these things?
But having said that, I mean, yes and no, because if you look at the actual sanctionals, the way that they've been laid out, generally the last workout is a thrusters and rope climbs or a thrusters and pull-ups. Doesn't matter where you are, that's the last workout of a sanctional. You know what I mean? That's generally the format. There's generally a run and a swim. There's generally, you know what I mean? So the format is the same. Maybe not a committee, but I think more thought must have gone into your arena before your workouts.
But that's what I mean. That's not necessarily a committee. I don't think they need to centralize programming, but just again some support from CrossFit side or Dave Castro's division to say, these are the workouts, but have you thought about this with regards to the viewership of this thing? You're going to have an online stream. How are you going to see who's in front? Are there going to be cones? You know, the very basics we talk about in our local competitions, because it's exactly that. I mean, I don't think you should program for it to be spectator friendly, but there's a couple of things you can do to just add in to make it spectator friendly.
So maybe it's that guidance that's needed. So maybe it's a question of the sanctioned event needs to submit their programming through to CrossFit to get advice, where Dave Castro and his team can sit and say, right, we've looked at this, we've looked at your arena, and this is what we would recommend you to do.
Yeah.
Maybe this movement isn't going to get the desired result that you think it will. Maybe you need to add in this group of movements or whatever. That could be the solution.
But going on to your thoughts there, Nick, basically, I think this is where the regional format will come back in, where there's a bit more freedom in the sanctional, and then they would have that regional going towards the end of the season. So people are qualifying through sanctionals potentially, and then there'll be more structure in terms of...
What he did say, though, on the sanctional side of things is that he doesn't like the way that the number of athletes can qualify. It's just too complicated from a spectator. He actually used that word, was from a spectator's perspective, is it's very difficult to see who's qualified and who hasn't qualified. Because now you have guys coming ninth at Waterpalooza that are qualifying for the games. So they want to simplify that. So I think they might allow the sanctionals, and it might be, like you say, a points leading up, something like that. But you won't necessarily be able to qualify from a sanctional. And I think that's where they'll go back to like a hybrid of the two, maybe, I don't know.
But then maybe the question is that points table, a point system whereby whether you're doing regional competition or whether you're doing a sanctional event, you can collect points throughout the season to put you in contention for games spot. And you need X amount of points, and maybe it's a question of regionals gives you maximum amount of points, but the sanctionals give you a certain number of points per placement.
I think it's similar to golf, where your PGA, your normal tournaments gives you a certain point ranking, scoring opportunity, but then the majors give you so much more, and if you win a major, you get bumped up quite a bit.
I think just in general, the goal is just for them to try and clean up the season for a professional athlete, because right now, you know, the games kind of fall in the middle of all the different sanctionals and stuff at the moment. So it just becomes a bit of an issue for an athlete to plan their season. Whereas, like you say, you know, the race to Dubai or something like that, everyone knows what tournaments they need to hit to get to the World Championships. So, and I think that's what they're trying to allude to. To Dubai, or whatever they call it in golf, is probably something they'll look at. I mean, this guy being data driven, I'm sure he'll figure out some formula to make sure it's set up correctly. So that's CrossFit broadened, and then on the local front, we getting ready to open. We have done a lot of things. We're just going to chat about, you know, our COVID readiness and how difficult the last couple of weeks have been. I don't know who wants to jump in. Mike, maybe you from an outside perspective, what do you see the biggest challenges being?
I don't know. I think, you know, we've spoken a lot about what if someone in the gym gets COVID themselves. The three of us are going to be here throughout most of the day. I think the biggest thing is not isolating that member and then looking after the 7 other members in the class, but the 3 coaches that potentially might have to self-isolate for 2 weeks. And what do we do from there? Who takes in, who falls in our classes? Our other coaches are all employed in other aspects of life, you know? So it's going to be a big challenge if that comes to play. For me,
I think it must be said that we've taken this COVID pandemic very seriously from the get-go, obviously with all of the stuff that we've tried to implement inside lockdown, and we have not changed our approach looking to reopen. We're even more serious, in fact, for the safety of people when we're coming in. And like you say, you know, obviously members' safety is paramount, but our coaches' safety also is paramount, because there's got to be people to coach the classes, you know. So this is going to be a difficult thing. Chalks, what are the things that we've put in place?
No, so yeah, I mean we sort of adhered to the social distancing, and we took a lot of our cues from the American boxes that have been going like this for a while now. So we have 6 square meter blocks, and they 1.5 meters apart. So we only allow 6 people in a class plus the coach. We just sort of work that out at roughly 20 square meters per person in general, so that there's not too many people. Then we had to go through this COVID readiness project where a company comes in and sort of assesses your readiness, and they set up hand sanitizing stations, and we have social distancing markers, and they did a little disinfecting of the whole gym, all 3 areas, which it looks quite cool. They spray everything with this fog, and then the virus disappears.
Looks like,
it's amazing.
It looks like in Monsters Inc. when they come out of the child's bedroom and they have to like hose them down. That's what it looks
Pretty
like.
much.
There were definitely guys in hazmat suits.
Yeah,
I was quite
definitely.
concerned.
Coming through, please. Stand aside. Clear the contaminated area.
And then, taking, so those are the things we had to do from, that has a bit of a financial implication. I don't think it's better than just staying closed.
Yeah.
We've put in a couple of protocols, from getting your temperature checked at the door to keeping your mask on until you start training or in your block. Those are things that we want to enforce. I see the challenges. Some members might, not see the value in that, or they don't always agree with wearing a mask or these type of things. And it's going to be difficult because we've always been a fun, community-driven box, and now, yes, you want to still keep the class fun, but you need people to adhere to the rules. So you need to be like a policeman and an entertainer in one, and you guys as the coaches, which is difficult because these are paying members, and everyone has their own views on the the seriousness of this virus. I think we in South Africa, in Johannesburg specifically, start to realize now how quickly this thing transmits between people, because now you actually know someone who's got it. It's coming closer and closer. I just hope the members follow through with that. And like I said, I'm sure 90% of them will or more, but you always have those 1 or 2 or 3 difficult, what do you call them? Fraught apples.
But we will, sorry Carl, we will have, I think, a teething process in the beginning for people to just become accustomed to the basic understanding of how our new format is going to work. But again, it's like a routine of anything. I think people will settle in within a couple of days, and I think normality will resume within this current structure. It's not going to take people long. And as we've said, people are dying to just get anywhere near the vicinity of other people training. I don't think they necessarily mind if they now have to stand an extra 1.5 meters apart from somebody. As long as they don't have to talk through a computer, I think people are going to be a lot more excited.
You mentioned, I think, what do you call it? Zoom fatigue. And that is exactly it. We sit in Zoom meetings all day, and then you go to your gym, which is online on Zoom, and you get to a point where you're just tired of looking at your computer screen for anything. So I agree with you. I think people, they will shout at one another just to be in vicinity of one another, but they'll be fine with the measures we put in place.
Yeah, I think with the, like you mentioned, the teething problems, I think it's important to note that we have done trial classes while we've been here, try to get coaches in and tried different scenarios, different equipment, how we can fit the equipment within a safe space of one another. So we've tried to be as thorough as we can, but like you say, you're going to get those members who want to hug each other, and they want to sit, the main things, they want to hug each other, and then they want to sit outside and chat after the class. So we're going to have to be vigilant of that, I think.
Yeah, it's all these community habits that are going to be tough to break. The high five is going to be a big one because it's an instinctual thing. To stick your hand out and high five somebody, and then you're going to see people quickly, awkwardly changing to that elbow thing. And I think we got to just sort of spread the word that it's best to just give them the jock nod. Well done, but sweet, eh? And let that be it. You know what I mean? Because if we can minimize the problem within this microcosm, it's going to be easier transition to become a little bit more natural later on.
But if we don't need to close every 3 days because someone contracted it. I'm pretty sure we'll get there, and that's why, like I said, it's getting closer, and you hear of someone. We will have members testing positive. I hope that, governed by the World Health Organization and all these protocols they put in place, that what we are doing is sufficient to stop the spread of the virus, because I mean, they claim this is on science, and the 2 meter social distancing and the masks and the sanitizing and all that. I hope it's, and it seems to be. Otherwise it wouldn't have been implemented in shopping centers all over the world. And I think the problem becomes exactly what you mentioned, is people sitting outside, taking off their mask for a little chat, or the odd hug, or whatever the case might be. But might not be in here. Well, we're going to need to police out there, just in the parking lot. You're going to have to. So it's going to be interesting, but I mean, I think we've done what we can, and I think we're ready. I think we've done more than is expected of us, in my opinion. And now we just need to go ahead, and we'll need to tackle this thing head on.
Yeah, look, I think it's nerve-wracking to open because of what can happen and having to be shut down, that kind of stuff. But I think in general, at least I'm sure Nick is, we're pretty excited about opening, number one. And number two, this whole online journey is like really molding itself into something else. And maybe we can discuss what our plans are, or our hopes are to get into the sort of online training market as well, for those members that are not so keen to come back in, and maybe anyone else that wants to train through ATG that can't make it to the gym. Maybe we should just discuss that a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something we recognized quite early on, and why we started working so hard on the online platform side of things. And we're constantly improving as we go. But the basic gist of it is we are moving towards an online platform whereby we have training videos, we have training programs, and we have membership that can solely be online. And this is something that we're going to try and develop within the next few weeks and months, to allow those members that are still skeptical to be able to continue their programming, not just something that they can patch together at home, but something comprehensive that they can use and get full fitness out of. I think that's been the big deal, is people have kind of felt like, well, this is a temporary fix, and this is something that we kind of have to mix together with a couple of different things to make it work. But this is going to be more along the lines of, all right, your gym is your home. This is where you're going to be training, and this is what you need to do to get to the peak of your fitness in your environment. And I think that's the difference. It's going to be specifically geared towards that. We're also focusing very heavily on slowly but surely professionalizing our videos, professionalizing the programming side of things, and our delivery system to get it to the people. So I think in the next few weeks, the members are going to start to see this available to them.
Yeah, and I think on what's going to be available, we've spoken about a whole bunch of things. It's not just going to be CrossFit all unloaded on there. We've spoken about the goal is to have yoga on there, like we have been on the online. We'll keep going. Maybe Mike can chat a little bit just now about the nutrition side of things that he's going to be brought in on to take over on the online program. And then obviously we want to move the fight fit and the karate stuff online as well. I mean, especially with the current climate with children, a lot of parents are very skeptical to have their children in a public place longer than they have to, other than a school, for example. So that's something that we're looking at as well.
Obviously we know what that offering is, but I'm sure a lot of people think online programming, and like I've done it a bit and whatnot, and they think just a page of workout. What are we offering to people? In terms the comprehensive. You say it's comprehensive.
Yeah.
So what is that offering?
Well, it'll all depend on your package at the end of the day. So we'll have a couple of packages open, but the general gist of it would be that you would get a daily workout, which we have been doing currently. It's about a 5-minute, 2 to 5 minute short workout that explains the workout that's coming up. We will have some sort of online coaching, a live class during the day, whether that's one class in the morning or one in the morning, one in the afternoon. These are still things that we will have to feel out as the program goes on. And then we will carry on with our follow-along classes. Those will be our main things. And then as it goes on, we will start adding, like strength programs and at-home stuff. And I think we will try and stay away from the athlete side of things for a while. It's more that we're just more trying to catch that general public that no longer wants to go to a Virgin Active, or can take our program and do it with dumbbells and a pull-up bar at Virgin Active if they wanted to. So I think that's where we're trying to focus. And then bringing in the nutrition side of things is something I've been trying to incorporate into the gym. It's a bit difficult with the actual gym community, but I think with an online program, a lot of people would be more interested. And maybe you could speak about what you think we could do on the nutrition side of things just to broaden that spectrum?
Yeah, I think again it's going to be something we need to play with. Firstly, I think Nick summed it up amazingly last week. Is nutrition is not an exact science. It's not a one. Something I do with Chalky is not something I'm going to do with you.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be a set thing that we have that every single person is going to go in. So it's going to be as individualized as we can get it on that kind of format, and go from there. There'll obviously be a starting point where everyone, normal eating habits, things, as I've been working with people throughout lockdown, I've found that just the very basic things, people just, they don't know. It's like comes to second nature to me, and sometimes I've got to look back and I'm just like, okay, dumb it down, don't be like this. People don't know all that stuff, so you kind of got to put those processes in place and then start looking at meal plans, look at performance side of it and stuff like that. So, but again, I think it's something we're going to have to play with and go from there.
Well, there's other things available also. We spoke about that whole holistic approach to fitness and wellness and health that we're looking at. And the yoga then comes into it as well, which is this extra added benefit where you look at a lot of people. I have many clients throughout the gym asking me for mobility programs and things that are going to help them to just become a bit more flexible and less injuries and all that type of thing. But we have that built in, and I think if we look at the yoga and if you look at ROMWOD, if you look at GOWOD, all of these stretching mechanisms come from yoga.
Yeah.
They take it straight out of the yoga and they probably formalize it a little bit more towards a CrossFit athlete. But doing a yoga class is going to give you virtually the same benefits if you're regular with it. I've been doing it quite regularly now since it started.
And would you say you're swollen flexy? That's my question.
I'm definitely not swole. We realized today that I'm probably the worst push-upper in the world. But flexy a little bit better, for sure, yeah.
And I mean, for such an old guy to get more flexible, it's got to tell you that yoga works.
I have to.
I mean, you're basically 55.
At my age.
It's like stretching biltong now.
For you young guys, it's easy. You just can wake up the next day and be fine. I need a little bit of help with recovery. So for me, the yoga has definitely been helping. So I would encourage a lot of people to take that on, and especially the guys. I think people have this thing that it's mobility and flexibility is a girl's thing.
Maybe you shouldn't be talking because you already wear like those sack pants and you would play a ukulele, so you're supposed to do yoga, surely.
I recall somebody named Chalky van der Merwe purchasing a pink pair of shorts recently and flaunting around with his flowery mask and his pink shorts. You know what I mean? I'm just saying that.
Sometimes you need to conform to the people around you just to fit in, and that's unfortunately what's happening here. One of these days I'm going to buy a guitar and we can jam together.
I'm surprised you know what it's called.
All right, we're going to leave it there for today. Nick will take it away for us with a legendary dad joke.
You guys are funny, but I got a confession to make. I'm a pretty funny guy myself.
Can't laugh at the joke before you said it.
Okay. I went to a psychic. I knocked on her front door and she yelled, "Who is it?" So I left.
So bad, Lucas.
Oh, that's shocking.
Thanks for listening. Keep an eye out for another episode coming soon.